Hello dear students, today we are starting cell membrane, that is the topic of human cell. And of course I told you initially that this topic, that is human cell, is among the topics of biochemistry, along with that physiology. So initially we'll be looking towards its structural components, or we can say structural characteristics or features. After that we'll be moving towards the chemical makeup of cell membrane or plasma membrane. Of course that will be of more importance regarding biochemistry. So basically cell membrane, as the name indicates, that it is a membrane on a cell, that is it's covering the components or the organelles of any cell. So this membrane, that is we are calling it plasma membrane, or we are naming it cell membrane. So cell membrane is actually a lipid bilayer, and it is possessing different proteins, different lipids, carbohydrates, and other, we can say, micro and macro molecules inside its structure. So first we'll be looking towards the functions of cell membrane. After that we'll be moving towards the different, we can say, label diagrams, or we can say parts of cell membrane, which is important regarding its function, regarding its different, we can say, processes which are taking place inside this structure or this organelle. So let's come towards the functions. Cell membrane of any cell, whether it is we can say any cell of the body, all of them are almost possessing these four functions. That is, the first function of cell membrane is protection. For example, if there is any cell, this is one of the cells, cell of our body, nucleus, or here for example mitochondrion, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies, and so on, ribosomes, etc. So now the point is that above this cell there will be membrane. This is cell membrane. So now just be attentive. So this is the outer covering of a specific cell, that is cell of our body. Now look, this is the outer covering of this cell, and this outer covering is actually known as the cell membrane of this specific cell. So the first function of this membrane or this organelle is that it is protecting the entire organelles inside this cell from the external environment, or in other words from physical and chemical insults. There might be, for example, certain agents which can harm the intracellular organelles, or there might be certain changes in temperature, changes in their physical and chemical environment. So protection from physical agent, from chemical agent, from microbiological agents, got it? These are the entire functions of cell membrane. So protection, that is the most important one. So this cell membrane is protecting the inner environment of this specific cell from external insults. And external insults can be physical, it can be chemical, or it can be microbiological. Got it? And so on. So over here, physical, chemical, microbiological agents are harming the cell. So Allah Almighty has provided this cell with a structure or organelle known as cell membrane. So first function is protection. Next is giving a shape to the cell. Now this is a specific shell, and this is cuboidal cell. This cuboidal shape is due to the shape of the outer covering or the outer membrane. So the outer membrane or cell membrane is providing this specific cell a specific shape. So this shape is due to the cell membrane. So this is again another function of cell membrane. Then comes the site for receptors. Site for receptors. Upon this cell membrane there are different receptors. These are types of, for example, receptors. Receptor number 1, 2, 3. So receptor is any structure, most of the time protein in nature, which accepts ligand, or which accepts any other chemical substance to get attached with it. So this specific, we can say, receptor, this is made up of proteins, or we can say polypeptide. These receptors are most of the time on the upper surfaces of cell membrane. So cell surface receptors are again the receptor site is of course what? Cell membrane. So cell membrane is providing site for receptors. So receptor site is on cell membrane. This is another function. And finally comes semi-permeability. By semi-permeability, I mean that the cell membrane will be allowing a number of chemical substances or molecules, and they will be restricting others. So now again I am repeating this point. What do you mean by semi-permeability? Semi-permeability means when any cell membrane or when any structure is allowing a number of molecules and still we can say restricting others. So I mean to say that in the presence of cell membrane, some of the molecules will be moving inside the cell while other will be restricted with the help of this cell membrane. And of course this is for our own good. This is for our healthy, or we can say physiological state maintenance. If there were we can say no check and balance on this specific point, then there will be the entry of certain toxins, certain other we can say harmful substances. They will be moving inside the cell, and after that there will be certain we can say pathological conditions. So cell membrane are possessing certain we can say channels, certain gates, and these gates and channels are allowing a number of ions, a number of molecules, while restricting others. So semi-permeability means that is allowing some molecules and restricting others. This is still another function of plasma membrane or cell membrane. So these four were the basic functions of cell membrane. Now let's move towards the structure of cell membrane. What are the different structures involved in the formation of cell membrane? So be attentive. Okay, after being said about the functions of cell membrane, now we will be moving towards the structure of cell membrane. As I told you that almost all of the cells are possessing cell membranes. True cells are possessing cell membranes in case of we human beings. So the cell membrane is actually made up of lipids. It is made up of lipids. More than 75%, 80% of the components of plasma membrane, they are actually lipids. And among them we can say that is among lipids, phospholipids are the most abundant one. Now if we just look towards the structural components, we can say the structural components of cells. So in case of biomolecules, so all of the biomolecules are involved, that is lipids on the first number, then comes proteins, carbohydrates, etc. So these three are biomolecules and they are among the components of plasma membrane or cell membrane. So cell membrane is basically made up of lipids. We can say more than 75% of its components are lipids, and different types of lipids, among them phospholipids are the most abundant one. So now look, this is actually one of the structures of plasma membrane. This is the inner side of plasma membrane, this is the outer side of plasma membrane. In other words, we can call this place extracellular fluid, or we can say extracellular environment, and this is cytoplasm, or in other words intracellular environment. So in between intracellular environment and extracellular environment there comes cell membrane. Don't get confused with this structure, this is something else. We are talking only about the upper structure. So this is one of your cells, for example, entire. This is the inner side of your cell, or in other words this is the cytoplasm of the cell, or in other words we can call it intracellular fluid or environment. And this is the outside we can say of this specific cell, and we call it extracellular fluid or extracellular environment. So over here in between them there is a plasma membrane or cell membrane. Plasma membrane is made up of phospholipids. These molecules, red and dark molecules, red and black colored molecules are actually phospholipids. They are polar heads of phospholipids. And these red structures are the polar heads of phospholipids, and the black portions are actually the non-polar tails of phospholipids. What does it mean? Now look, if you just write it down such like this, for example, over here. So the plasma membrane is phospholipid bilayer. Phospholipid this is the structure of phospholipid bilayer. Now the outer portion of this plasma membrane is actually polar. They are polar heads, and the inner side is non-polar, or we can say lipid soluble, or in other words we can say that the inner side of this plasma membrane is being we can say that non-polar, so we can call it lipophilic, lipid loving, lipophilic, and over here there is lipophobic, lipid repelling or lipid hating. So this is lipophilic portion of plasma membrane, this is lipophobic, or in other words hydrophilic portion. Got it? So these are in other words we can say, if we just look towards the structure of plasma membrane is basically made up of phospholipid bilayer, or in other words lipids. They are made up of lipids. Now among lipids there are other atoms or we can molecules, other structures which are embedded in this we can say lipid bilayer. Strictly speaking, the entire we can say that plasma membrane is made up of lipids. Among lipids there are other proteins, there are other molecules, macromolecules, biomolecules, which are embedded inside this phospholipid bilayer. So these are the structure. This is one of the embedded we can say protein, this is another embedded protein, this is still another embedded proteins. There might be receptors, there might be enzymes, and so on. We can say a number of biomolecules, cholesterol we can say molecule, and so on. So now the structure of this plasma membrane, the red heads are actually the polar heads of phospholipid, and these black structures are actually non-polar tails of phospholipids, and in between them there are transmembrane proteins, and of course among them there are also peripheral proteins. So these are the transmembrane or integral protein. We call them integral protein or transmembrane proteins. Integrate. These are the integral proteins. So once if the protein is moving through and through. Now look, there is for example a protein which is moving through and through the plasma membrane, or we can say this specific structure. We call this protein as transmembrane protein, or in other words integral protein. There are another proteins which we call peripheral proteins. Periphery means we can say other than the center. So peripheral proteins are only on the upper or lower portions of the plasma membrane, or in other words they are embedded in the upper portion like this. For example, this is integral protein. Now over here there is still another integral protein. Got it? So if protein is not moving through and through any plasma membrane or cell membrane, we call that protein as peripheral protein. And if protein is moving through and through this plasma membrane, got it, in a fashion like this, got it, this is for example plasma membrane, and this protein is moving through and through. So this type of protein is known as integral protein. So in other words, along with lipids or phospholipid bilayer, there are certain proteins. They are of two types. Some proteins are moving we can say through and through the plasma membrane, and we call them transmembrane protein, or we can say integral proteins. Other proteins are only on the lower surface or upper surface of this specific plasma membrane, and we title such proteins as peripheral proteins. Got it? So these were some points regarding these proteins. Along with that, there are certain channel proteins. There are different types of proteins. It will be coming in the later we can say structure. So these are the channel proteins, and among these channel proteins, they are responsible for the movement of certain molecules. As I told you over here that cell membrane is responsible for semi-permeability. So these channel proteins will be allowing some we can say molecules and restricting others. So this was about the structure of we can say that plasma membrane. This is the upper portion of the cell. This is the inner portion of the cell. This is the outer portion or extracellular fluid. or extracellular environment of this cell, and this is the intracellular environment of this specific, we can say, cell. So now ahead in next video we'll be looking towards different enzymes, different proteins and their functions which are embedded in this plasma membrane or cell membrane, which will be coming in my later video. But let me just recap it. Let me just summarize this topic, that is the cell membrane. Cell membrane is one of the most important organelles of our cells, and cell membrane is responsible for the protection, shape, receptor site, we can say, and semi-permeability. That is, the receptor site is located on the cell membrane, and finally comes semi-permeability. So these four are the major functions of cell membrane. And as I told you that cell membrane is we can say most abundantly present molecules or biomolecule in cell membrane is phospholipid, or in other words they are lipid. And among lipids there are certain other molecules of proteins, carbohydrate, glycoproteins, lipoproteins and others, which are possessing different functions. So as I told you that proteins are of two types, that is integral protein or transmembrane protein, and peripheral proteins, which are on the lower and uppermost portions of cell membrane. And among them there are some molecules of cholesterol which are embedded inside this lipophilic portion. This is the lipophilic environment of this specific, we can say, plasma membrane. So these cholesterol molecules are providing, as they are also lipid, or we can say lipophilic, lipid loving, so they are actually embedded in the lipophilic portion of this plasma membrane. So these molecules, that is cholesterol, they are providing elasticity, and they are providing integrity to cells. They are providing, we can say, the tensile strength, that the cell membrane or plasma membrane shall be more flexible. So in other words, we can say cholesterol molecules embedded in the lipophilic portion of this plasma membrane is responsible for the elasticity of this specific plasma membrane. So in the presence of cholesterol molecules, the plasma membrane is more elastic. So these were some points regarding the initial we can say concepts of cell membrane. Now in my later video we will be looking towards different channels, different enzymes and different receptors which are on the cell surface, or we can say integrated or transmembrane, we can say proteins which are responsible for the we can say signal transduction and other functions. Got it? So till now there were only the points regarding the introduction to cell membrane. In my later video I'll be telling you people that how different proteins are acting in this specific organelle and what are their importances. So keep watching my videos. Allah Hafiz.